Hello and welcome to the Never Standing Still podcast. My name is Stephanie, and in this final episode of our short podcast series, I'll be sharing with you the story of charity worker and humanitarian Lady Ryder of Warsaw, better known as Sue Ryder. The 3rd of July 2024 would have been the 100th year of this remarkable woman. Today most people only recognise her name for the charity shops for which she was a pioneer, but there is so much more to learn about her phenomenal life. In our previous 2 episodes, we talked about Sue's early life growing up in Leeds and Suffolk and how she came to serve during the Second World War in the First Aid Nursing Yeomanry and the beginnings of her charity work in post-war Europe. In this, our final episode, we shall talk more about how this work developed into other charities, both in her name and with her husband, Group Captain Leonard Cheshire. I've been able to access their oral history archive and also speak to the current chairman and a beneficiary of their work, so I will share with you lots of stories from the individuals involved to give you a flavour of what she achieved in her lifetime. But first, to help set the scene, a bit of background. Sue's work in the UK was first registered with the Charity Commission as the Forgotten Allies Friendship Trust in 1953. As explored in previous episodes, the relief work that culminated in this charity began in post-war Europe and started as a holiday scheme for concentration camp survivors that she was helping. A lot of them were Polish, and Sue felt an affinity with the Poles, especially after serving with them during the war. The first UK home for survivors was in her mother's house in Cavendish, and she continued to live with this community for the rest of her life. The initial aims of her work were to provide homes for people of all nationalities who were chronically ill or disabled, and to assist any stateless person in need. This she did in the UK and Germany, and in 1959, the same year she married fellow humanitarian Leonard Cheshire, they both established Raphael in Dehradun, India, to help people with TB and leprosy. In the 60s and 70s, many homes were established in Poland and Yugoslavia, Belgium and then the UK. In the 1980s, a project started in Belize, then Ethiopia. In 1982, the Sue Ryder Foundation in Ireland was established. In 1990, the Sue Ryder Foundation in Malawi. 1994, the Sue Ryder Foundation in Prague. 1987, the Fondazione Sue Ryder in Italy. I could go on, and this is by no means an exhaustive list of all of Sue and her foundation's work, but it just shows the breadth of what she did achieve in her lifetime. In 1968, the Forgotten Allies Trust became the charity Sue Ryder, and Sue remained the founder and deeply involved in this charity until a break with the trustees shortly before her death in 2000. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. That's when she started the Lady Ryder of Warsaw Memorial Trust to continue the work she had started with her own values at the core, something she felt had been lost in her first charity. As time went on, the nature of the work she did also changed, as the numbers of displaced persons from the Second World War became less, and she was providing more cancer and palliative care. The work of Charity Sue Ryder changed as a result, and the assisting stateless persons part of the UK work stopped. But Sue also founded other charities. She started the Ryder Cheshire Foundation with her husband in 1964, which ran projects in Western Tanzania to help refugees and Ethiopia to help with the famine there, and they also supported Raphael in India. There was even a Ryder Cheshire Film Unit, making and distributing films about their work. These films are now archived at the British Film Institute. This work continues today in the UK charity Enrich and Ryder Cheshire in Australia. A little bit more about Enrich. In 1984, the Ryder Cheshire Volunteers Project began in Basingstoke and Didcot to pair up people stuck in the house with qualified volunteers to help them get out and about, and that work continues today in Leicestershire and Oxfordshire with Enrich. The Sue Ryder Prayer Fellowship, which still exists today at Parmoor on the borders of Oxfordshire, was registered in 1994 and runs a retreat centre and horticulture project for disadvantaged people. Now let's hear from the people involved in what Sue and Leonard called the work. First, Tom Knoll gives an example of how he became involved and ended up founding a Sue Ryder home in Prague. I use the phrase ended up for a reason, as you will see in this archive clip. It also gets across how her work, her experiences and her faith were fundamental to what she was trying to achieve, and also what it was like to work with her.
I was sort of coasting a bit after university, and Sue decided that I was to be the one for Prague. And for the first 2 years or so that I was out there, because it turned into a 5-year experience, for the first 2 years she didn't pay me anything, or I was not officially, I don't think I was ever officially employed, to be honest. We had to sort of obviously eventually set up a foundation in the Czech Republic as it became, and at that point, I had to sort of be registered as an alien and all that sort of thing and be official. But for the first couple of years, I was really just following her very meagre instructions to try and make contact with, first of all, people who were suffering in different ways. And to do that, she just left it up to one. There was no particular, you must see these type of people, or you must go and see such and such an individual. And I suppose that for her, her incredible faith led her to just put her faith in people in the same way that she did in God, really. And hers was a very willful faith, I think. I often reflect that prayer nowadays can be very much a sort of plea for strength to bear what comes, whereas in Sue's case, I always thought that prayer was very much almost a demand that her will be done as much as God's, if that makes any sense. In the most wonderful way, it has to be said. And of course, that was terribly inspiring. I suspect that for her generation, it would have been very obvious and understandable to many people. I think for my generation, that was an absolutely extraordinary experience to meet and get to know a bit somebody like that. For her, I suspect that her faith led to believe that there was no such thing as extraordinary in people, because everyone was extraordinary, and it took time for me to sort of understand. So we went to see the mayor and said, this is who we are, what do you think? And he thought we were quite bonkers, I think, and he couldn't quite understand why an individual or a foundation in the UK would be interested in doing this for his citizens. He was convinced there was a catch. What's the catch? What's the catch? Anyway, Sue came to visit, and as she always did, arrived at Prague airport and having ordered special assistance, so pushed out in a wheelchair, but with about 20, I think, shopping bags, carrier bags, all tied up and all with different things in, and these came with her wherever we went. So we arrived at the City Hall, and I think the mayor was even more astonished when he met Sue, because I don't know quite what he was expecting, some rich benefactress or philanthropist, I'm not sure. But the first thing was that we hadn't got our passports with us, and the security didn't want to let us through, and they couldn't understand how you would get into any public building in the UK without identity. So it happens all the time. She talked through any barrier, or didn't talk through it, actually just smiled through it from a height well below that of the doorman. And nobody could say no to her. It was quite extraordinary. So the mayor, we were ushered into his office, and various officials hovering around with notepads, and asked if she'd like coffee. Oh no, just hot water please. So the hot water came with sort of raised eyebrows. Why does she want hot water? Rootling around in the Sainsbury's bag, and out came her tea bags and little pot of instant coffee. And of course she starts offering it around everybody. And then I think came out with something like, I can't take anything off the Czechs after the war, so I always carry enough for myself and them, she goes. And I think that's when the mayor realised he was talking to someone who was either a little bit off the scale or who was very serious. And I think luckily he went for the very serious side, because he suddenly kind of got serious with her and started really interacting.
In this speech at an event in Bushey, Hertfordshire, from the 1960s, Sue talks about the scope of her work and the different projects she was doing with her foundation in Ryder, Cheshire. She mentions renovating Higgleton Hall in Yorkshire, which was a Sue Ryder home until 2015, and the work she did with Leonard Cheshire in India at Raphael. In the UK, much of this work was physical building work, renovating what we understand today as heritage buildings. It's worth bearing in mind that in the post-war UK, these large houses and estates with space for many were being sold cheaply by aristocratic families who couldn't afford them anymore, especially if they had been requisitioned during the war and needed extensive repair. Both Sue and Leonard saw this as an opportunity to save community heritage and give it back to their localities with homes and services in them. Abroad, Sue pioneered a way of getting good quality buildings made in prefabricated kits, constructed by a firm in Wolverhampton and shipped out to be built by local teams, though volunteers from the UK would often go over as well. Amongst all this, and having a young family, Sue continued to drive across Europe, distributing things donated to her such as food, clothing and equipment. In this speech, Sue starts off talking about the Raphael project.
Those from many miles away and in the locality with different diseases, and then there are children who are quite healthy, though many have suffered from lack of food. They often have parents who are diseased or have leprosy. Perhaps they have nobody, and they arrive unexpected. And it's sad to see them because when they first come, they're usually very shy and they don't really know the meaning of childhood. And as they live and grow up and are educated, they become not only very delightful, quite talented, some of them. They follow a normal school curriculum and go on for training. It's very interesting to hear even the 5- and 6-year-olds talk about what they want to do with life. The climate isn't easy, and I also have a very small mobile team that goes out and visits people in the slums and the children. There could be many more of these teams if we had more leaders and more assistants. We do get volunteers to come from Australia and New Zealand. They usually give up 2 years of their time. We've had others from other countries. But obviously it's mainly staffed by the Indians themselves, because that's obvious, the reasons, and they prefer it, though they like working with other nationalities. But they're very proud, and understandably so. They don't like accepting charity. I don't think anybody does. If you call it love, that's different and work, isn't it? But aid's not a good word. Not in our context, perhaps. It's difficult to mention the other countries fleetingly because each is so different. There are homes and hospitals built elsewhere, and again with the local authorities, but also by our own tradesmen and builders who go out, and we follow a certain design, which is a Standard H, called a Foundation Standard H, which consists of 10,000 square feet. And it can be erected relatively easily if we have sufficient people to do it, a team with the right trades, in a matter of months, and providing the weather holds good and we can work on the carcass during the winter. Those are important factors. We've had very nice tradesmen. A lot have married locally, particularly in Poland, and we're always looking for new ones. There were other homes started in Britain, and again I had to renovate the houses with local people, usually to a time limit. And they had very joyous moments as well as moments of concern. Getting a place ready with perhaps 30-odd bedrooms wasn't particularly easy. And we found that the people locally were generous and responded once they knew what the needs were. So often people don't realise the needs, and if you tell them, well, they say, oh, that's terrible, and let it pass by, instead of realising that it's the effort made by one individual that can make all the difference on the other individual's life. They see it as a very vast problem which doesn't directly affect them. They've never had any sadness or sorrow in their own lives, and perhaps as an attitude occasionally about, I'm all right, Jack. Or they say, it's really nothing to do with a private foundation. It should be coped with by the state. These are all rather general statements, I find. Whereas many of the school children and the young, they have a different attitude. Not all, but some. I think our hope lies with them, because they are full of caring and interest, and they accept a situation and will try and do something about it. I mentioned India and the corner of Suffolk. Then there was Hickleton in Yorkshire and Stagenhoe in Hertfordshire. Poland, that's really a book on its own, and so is Yugoslavia. Again, one works with the local authorities and the people, and the priorities are determined. Well, they usually throw it back on me, but I have to do a survey wherever I go and listen to what their own people have decided to do on their own. And it's quite a lot of field works involved, because I listen to them and what they believe to be the priorities and dilemmas, and together I go round with them and visit those who are in their homes and who are sick, whether they be children or adults. And then a final decision has to be made as to where the home or hospital is going to be located within a region or place, and according to what the others are going to do. So it's usually places me in a great dilemma, because I realise all the time, and in fact it's something that I have to live with day and night, of the millions that I don't reach. So instead of people saying, oh, how marvellous this is, I say, well, it isn't at all, because if we were all reaching many more, then we could perhaps stop a bit and rest on our oars. But we can never do that. We're always aware of those that we never reach and who are waiting and in great pain.
In 2000, Lady Ryder set up another trust, initially called the Bouverie Foundation, to continue her work. Later, Bouverie was renamed the Lady Ryder of Warsaw Memorial Trust. Ruth Young, who worked as a volunteer and then as Sue's assistant, says this about Sue's break with her foundation.
I don't know how she would have coped, actually, where we are now. Most charities are quite sort of big business now, and that's what she tried to keep away from as much as possible. And probably that's why the Sue Ryder Foundation continued in the way it did, as long as it did, really. It was, when people were supporting it in those years, a lot of people could see the changes that were happening on the charities, and one thing they liked to support the foundation was because they got a personal letter from Lady Ryder thanking them for their donation. They had an annual letter a magazine once a year, which it was informative and encouraged donations, but it wasn't. People felt they weren't being pushed for money then all the time. It was very hard for her. To be fair, it was hard for everybody concerned. Difficult for her to adapt to, and if it hasn't been mentioned before, it caused a proper rift, and I don't think that can be ignored. Actually, rights and wrongs of it, I don't know. Everybody will have their opinion on that, but it was not a happy time. Fundamentally, I think that other trustees at the time felt possibly could see the way the charities were going, they realised they did need probably a better structure because it was very much in a way straight down from Lady Ryder. They needed to put something in place. In my opinion, you don't throw the founder out when you put that process in place, and that's what happened. Yes, she was. I'm sure it was difficult for the trustees, and I know she was difficult at times, but that wouldn't have been my solution, I don't think.
Lady Ryder died on the 2nd of November 2000 in hospital near her home in Suffolk after a long illness. Sue Doe, who worked with Sue around the time of her death, had this to say.
I was very fond of her, and I was very sad when she died, but I think, she was just worn out, absolutely worn out. The thing that really, the first early days with her and getting to know her, what I liked about her was she would never ask you to do anything that she wouldn't do herself. She would scrub a floor, My friend went over to Cavendish on Sunday, she said, and she was in the cafe having afternoon tea, and she said she thought she saw Lady Ryder washing up in the kitchen. That wouldn't have been her, would it? I said, yes, it would. If she knew they were very, very busy, she'd go over there and help them. And that was her. She wouldn't say, because we will do this, not you will do this. We will do this.
The Lady Ryder of Warsaw Memorial Trust has been working to help disadvantaged people for nearly 25 years, and much like their founder Sue, they do projects to help people in the UK, but also have an international outlook and hold true to the values of their founder in the work they do. In this clip from their archives, past trustee Arlene Wise talks about the work they do, including her father Stephen Wise, who was an early trustee.
So my father was a trustee for many years, and then as he got older, he's now 96, so about 10 years ago when he felt it was the time to step down, the other trustees asked me if I would, take his place. So I was very honoured and said yes, that I'd like to do that. So at that stage became I suppose, a lot more knowledgeable about the work that she had done in her lifetime, and how important it was as a trust that we sort of kept her memory going and enabled good works that she wanted to do, both in this country, and abroad. So we support, different projects in places like Poland, which was very dear to her heart, and why she called herself Lady Ryder of Warsaw. So we work over there with a number of schools for the disabled, care homes, and so there's regular contact between our trust and Poland. We also support work in Lourdes, in France, and we've helped to finance disabled minibuses and things like that. Do a lot of work in Italy, in Rome in particular, and as a trust, we're there to try and help people that are doing good causes that Lady Ryder herself would have believed in. We've just started working with a charity called Bridges to Belarus, which is a cause that I think that Lady Ryder would have been delighted to support, and this is helping children and survivors of the Chernobyl disaster. And this is what, as a trust, that we try to do. Is help good causes that would chime with her Christian beliefs.
I spoke with current chairman Robert Frith about the work the Trust are doing today, and managed to catch up with one of their beneficiaries, Nicole, who is trained to be a GP. First, let's hear from Robert.
Yes, I'm chairman of the Lady Ryder of Warsaw Memorial Trust. My role really is twofold. Firstly, to make sure that we have a legacy and people can always remember Lady Ryder, Sue Ryder, for what she did and all the philanthropy throughout the second 50 years of the 20th century, 1950 to 2000. And secondly, to continue the work that she started. We've been very fortunate to have some quite sizable legacies, which gives us some investment income, which we hopefully can spend quite wisely. So with regard to legacy, we now have the centenary coming up, which is in July 2024, the centenary of her birth. And we've concentrated on a few things, and I think you might have mentioned it earlier in this podcast, the book written by Joanna Bogle, which has gone down very well, which is in 2 sections. The second section sets out where she worked across the world, which has actually enabled people to see the extent of the work that she did. Then you very kindly prepared these podcasts. And we've also created some boards, which really with a snapshot, 6 boards, say with photos what Sue Ryder did. And that, to some extent, is the legacy that I've wanted to create as chairman of the trust. Next week at the centenary, we actually have an event at Ognisko, the Polish Hearth Club in the West End, where we have Sir Nick Young, who actually worked for Sue Ryder.
He was from the British Red Cross as well, wasn't he?
Yes, that's right. He was chief executive there of the British Red Cross for a number of years, and he started his charity career with Sue Ryder. So it's very poignant that he can actually speak at the inaugural lecture. So he's speaking next week, actually on her 100th birthday, the 3rd of July. And then annually, I would very much like to continue an annual Sue Ryder lecture, just so that we can actually remind ourselves of the wonderful work she did, and as a great example to youngsters in the future.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it's nice to see the work that the Trust has been doing and then what it sees the future becoming, because I know in recent years you've done a lot of work with medical students.
That's right. Yeah.
And you've done some with refugees in the Ukraine on the Polish border.
Yes, I mean, the role of the Trust is really, whilst it's actually her legacy, and we can go through the objectives, the legal objectives, it really is to help the disadvantaged. And so what we have done over the years is really received requests for grants and given some money. We have slightly rebranded over the last few years to fund medical students who are coming from slightly disadvantaged backgrounds so that they can actually afford to do a medical degree. And I think that is wonderful because it provides very clever youngsters a future. It helps social mobility. It gives them a chance in life and helps a hope and aspiration. And we're doing this through Bristol University. And actually, the students will be there next week at the lecture that I mentioned earlier. I'm delighted because Bristol have really embraced us. And we now have two students a year going through the university from, as I said, disadvantaged backgrounds. They're going to become doctors, and they are very highly motivated for this chance in life. The idea of just funding the medical students has moved on slightly, because what I've also wanted to do is give them an experience. So therefore they can actually really remember what Sue Ryder is about. And the experience we're going to give them, and Bristol have embraced this, is they're going to spend 8 weeks in Raphael in northern India, working with the staff out there. And Bristol have put this in their degree course. So we're thrilled that actually we're going to fund the students through their 5-year course. They're going to do an 8-week time working in northern India, and then they're going to leave university as a doctor, fully qualified, but always, in my view, remember Sue Ryder. So I am future-proofing the name of Sue Ryder for the future. So I'm thrilled, really, with regard to the programme that we've been able to put together. In time, obviously, our students will become a cohort of doctors, and I hope that they will mentor each other. But I think that is just sort of we've just planted the seed at the moment. That will be the oak tree. And actually, when you look at all the work that's been continuing throughout the world that Sue Ryder started over the course of her life, you can actually see that these things do grow and do become self-perpetuating. So I'm actually thrilled with regard to the future there for the medical students. It really is, the youth, a good message, and it really does bode well for the future. And I think personally, I think it's a great example of philanthropy.
Well, it's really going to help us because we know we need doctors and GPs and those types of skills in this country. So I can see immediately how it will benefit.
Yes, everyone. when you think of how many people they're going to touch in their life, age 25 becoming a qualified doctor, age 65 retiring. So the Sue Ryder's name, I hope, through the work we've done over the last few years, will live on.
And how about the next 100 years? What do you see the trust doing then?
Well, every so often we get notification of we're getting a legacy through people that knew Sue. We have put in place a fundraiser. So we do see this sort of branding into the medical world as something that we can actually leverage off. So I would very much like to think that we will be creating a cohort, as I said earlier, of doctors under the Sue Ryder banner. And that will feed through into the future and become our personal legacy from the trust. Whilst we have various entities such as the Sue Ryder Care, the Sue Ryder Prayer Fellowship at Parmore, and this trust, I do hope that we're going to have a sort of a virtual cohort of doctors who have qualified from Bristol University and always remember the name Sue Ryder. And I hope that will be long lasting. Yeah, I really do.
I know that you have given money to some international projects. There's
Yes.
Lourdes and also the refugee crisis on the Polish border with Ukraine. Are you going to continue doing that kind of work as well?
We are. The original Bouverie charity was set up to really help fund the homes in Poland, support the initiative in Italy, and also Lourdes. And we are still doing that. Every year, we're giving substantial money to Italy. They're working in prisons. They're doing a lot of good work out there in Rome. Then we are actually enabling disadvantaged children to go to Lourdes each year. And only this year, earlier in the year, February, we gave £10,000 to a home in Poland to fund 2 industrial washing machines. Now, how different is that? But where would they get the money for washing machines in a home? They need it for the hygiene, for good practice, and they were absolutely thrilled. because it really filled a need for them. So yes, our original objectives of funding Poland, Italy and Lourdes are very much dear to our heart. In respect of Ukraine, over the course of the first 6 months of the war, we gave up to £50,000 to 3 charities that were involved in Ukraine, mainly the Red Cross, so that actually the refugees coming across from Ukraine into Poland were looked after and had the basic amenities. So we were laughing to ourselves how Sue Ryder would have jumped into her little lorry, Joshua, and taken a lot of provisions over there. I'm afraid we didn't do that. We actually just sent money. Slightly different attitude to the wonderful Sue Ryder, but you've got to laugh. I mean, that's what she'd have done. We did it slightly differently. But yes, we have a very big, we do have funds available for that, and we have given over the last few years as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because obviously, having known quite a bit about Sue Ryder and her husband Leonard Cheshire's working as their archivist, as I did for 10 years, I could see that they both really were internationalists. And I think a lot of that was because of their experiences of the Second World War and the way that they wanted to shape the future of the world, play their part, I think, afterwards. Sue Ryder Care, as they were, Sue Ryder, they're now not an international charity, and neither is Leonard Cheshire. So I think it's really important that Lady Ryder Trust keeps that close up, because that was their vision. That was their vision separately. That was their vision together. So I think it's really vital. And also having that link with Raphael, which was basically their marriage, wasn't it? They married there, and that was their heart was Raphael. So I think that's really wonderful.
I mean, thank you for mentioning that, because that was really how this charity started, to really fulfill to the gap that Sue Ryder Care became very UK based, and therefore she still wanted to be funding the overseas activities. So our main drive in the early days was Poland, Italy and Lourdes. And so we do give regularly to those needs. But I personally wanted to make sure that we had a branding so that we actually had a future, and the medical students in the UK really fulfilled that need. So we're doing both really to some extent now. But the Raphael came about because I really wanted to be able to give the students an experience. You know, it's all very well giving them the money and then reading the book, but actually to be able to travel to Raphael for 8 weeks and actually experience what goes on out there, different culture, different medical practices, you know, the need of the poverty out there in India, I think will be quite mind-blowing for them. And our one doctor, Nicole Lorking, has already done that. And she wrote such a wonderful report. It became a no-brainer. And Bristol really embraced it as well, which has been fantastic.
Now let's hear from Nicole to find out more about how she came to learn about the medical bursary and what it was like travelling to India and working at Raphael.
My name's Nicole Lorking, and I'm currently entering into GP training in August, which is where I am at the moment. But there's been a very long journey to get to that point. I moved over to the UK from South Africa actually when I was 10 years old, and sort of entered the schooling system from then, and went to university first in 2012 and did psychology. And then through my psychology degree, I found a love for medicine, and a bit late to the party decided that that was actually the career that I wanted to pursue, and sort of started heading towards that way, doing lots of different projects and things on the side, getting my CV up to a standard, when my grades up to a standard that I would be interviewed and accepted into medical school, which I was, thankfully, up in Scotland, in Aberdeen. And I started attending there in 2015. But in my second year, because it was my second degree, there's not a lot of funding that's available for you. And also because I was an English student going to Scotland, I was still being charged English fees, which are significantly greater than Scottish fees. I started to really, really struggle in my second year because all of the private loan companies were very nervous that, you know, you wouldn't be able to pay it back. And they all sort of saying, no, we can't give you any more. And at this point, I'm already into my degree, and I'm sort of doing very well in it and really, really enjoying it. And then the realization of, oh, I might not be able to finish this. I might not be able to actually graduate and become a doctor was very, very, it was during my second year exams that all of this was going on, and it was very, very stressful.
Yeah, that sounds very stressful.
Yeah. I honestly don't think I've been in a harder position that I can actually remember myself personally. So yeah, that was a very, very tough time. And I started sort of looking around for any help at all that I could get from charities or from friends and family. And I come from a single parent household, so we really don't have the facilities to be able to put me through on our own. So yeah, that's how I came across Lady Ryder. And I hadn't actually heard of them before. I was aware of them as, you know, in the high street charity shops and things. I'd seen her name before, I'd seen the organization, but I'd never actually delved deep into what they stood for, where they came from and how it came to be. So they thankfully reached back out to me when I was desperately asking for help, just trying to finish my course and actually fulfill what I wanted to do in life. And I remember Lady Hobhouse and Mr. Frith came back to me saying, actually, this is something we could possibly help you with. It was like, I don't know, the heavens opened. I was like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. So that was how I came to know about them and how it all started, trying to get that approved to get me through. But I wouldn't have been able to finish my degree if it wasn't for them, because that was the only lifeline I was given. No one else got back. All of, you know, the companies are very corporate and very like, no, this is not something we want to do. I entirely owe my whole medical degree to them, actually.
Well, that's wonderful. I mean, I'm so glad that they were able to help you. And it's a bursary, isn't it? So they paid your fees.
Yes. Yeah. I've always been quite a good student, but that gave me a very, very big incentive to really put my head down and, you know, feel like I deserved this input from them as well. Very happily graduated with, you know, flying colours. So
Oh, well
yeah.
done, well done. So you're going to become a GP.
Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. What an
Yeah.
achievement. It's
Thank
hard
you.
work.
Thanks. It is. Yeah, it is.
So what are the next steps for you now then?
Completed my foundation training. So after you finish medical school, you have to have 2 years where you're out in all sorts of specialties, getting a taste for the NHS and how it works. And then you choose your specialization. So I've chosen GP, which is 3 years of training. So I'll be starting this August for 3 years to complete that. And then I'll be fully qualified GP. Obviously working the whole time, but just, yeah, learning alongside it.
How about Lady Ryder Trust? I presume that they want to keep informed of what you're doing. And I wondered if you knew of anybody else.
So I do keep in contact with Mr. Frith and Lady Hobhouse. I get the occasional update on the medical bursaries that they're doing, particularly with Bristol University. So I think they've got 4 students at the minute, and they're also sending students to Raphael in India with the Ryder house there, which I was very lucky to have gone to and experienced myself, actually, with the Lady Ryder name. They're sort of keeping me up to date with that and trying to see how involved I can get with the new students, the new people kind of receiving what I very happily received from them. So yeah, I think it's nice to be a part of it. I feel like I'm a part of something now, which I don't think I would have had the opportunity to be beforehand, you know, something that can create a legacy in her name and what she stood for in her work. It's sort of snowballing. It's getting larger and larger every year. They're adding new students and new projects and things. So it's really exciting. It's really sort of humbling as well to have been the first person to kind of help set it all up. So yeah, it's very exciting.
And what was Raphael like? I've never been. I've seen photos of
Oh,
it and know
amazing.
quite a bit. It looks like a really
Yeah.
special place.
It was very special. I was only there for I think 10 days, which is nowhere near enough time. But I managed to get through all of the sort of different segments that they've got. So they've got multiple different housing for children of different ages with disability, cerebral palsy, things that society quite easily shun over there still to this day. And there's a whole living area for people with cured leprosy, which is initially how it started. And they've also got a TB hospital, which is recognized by the Indian government there. So they hold, I think, up to 18 patients there with active TB, which was very, very interesting from a medical point to go out and actually see how that's working. But it was like a complete oasis in the really, really busy town around it. And you just go in, it's just green and beautiful and quiet, and all the children are so happy, and you can just see how much they're influencing their their society and teaching the teachers that are there to deal with children with special needs as well. In India is quite a new concept, and they're not really sure yet how to manage it. So yeah, I think they're pushing boundaries out there as well, which is really exciting. Every opportunity I get, I thank them, particularly Lady Hobhouse and Mr. Frith. They've done absolute wonders for me, and not only me now, it's all the new students that they're bringing in every year. So I just wanted to say again how grateful I am to them and to the trust for actually listening in a time of need when it was really I was at my end in terms of my career. I didn't know what I was going to do, and this was my life passion, so they allowed me to carry on with that, which is priceless, really.
We have now come to the end of podcast series Never Standing Still, telling the story of the life and legacy of Sue Ryder, Lady Ryder of Warsaw, a determined person who helped many through her work. She, much like her husband, walked the walk as well as talked the talk, and dedicated her life to helping those in need. It comes across from people's memories and her own voice that survives in the archives that she had a unique personality and could be difficult to work with, but that was because she was so dedicated to her cause. She inspired people too, and people helped her in her work, and the fact that her legacy survives today in multiple countries is testament to her vision. I would like to thank Robert Frith, Ruth Young, Elizabeth Thomas, and others at the Lady Ryder of Warsaw Memorial Trust for their support to produce this podcast and allowing me access to their fascinating archives. Thanks also to speakers Lynette Beardwood from the First Aid Nursing Yeomanry, Claire Mully, Nicole Lawking, and others who have allowed me to interview them, and lastly to you listeners for staying with me on this journey. Please do like and share this podcast with your friends, families and loved ones to celebrate the life and legacy of the remarkable Sue Ryder in her centenary year. If you would like to find out more about the Lady Ryder of Warsaw Memorial Trust, you can go to their website. If you would like to purchase a copy of Joanna Bogle's book, donate to their work or otherwise support them, please visit their website www.lrwmt.org.uk and look for their How You Can Help page.